Welcome to Sky's the Limit. I'm your host, Skylar Musick. Today, our guest is Roberta Winters. Roberta first became involved with the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township, serving as a liaison for local educational issues in Radnor. She quickly joined the board of the Pennsylvania League. Eventually, Roberta served as president of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township. During this time, she engaged the Radnor League in many important community issues, including gerrymandering, registering eligible students to vote, and sponsoring public forums on topics covering environmental, school, and other issues. In June 2021, Roberta stepped down after serving as president for 3 terms. More recently, Roberta is still a presence at local government meetings. She also works with the League's interns and student members and continues to host interviews here at Mainline TV Network. In December, Roberta was awarded the Civic Participation Award by the League of Women Voters. Outside of the League, Roberta was a teacher in the Radnor Township schools for over 30 years. Welcome, Roberta. How are you?
Thank you, Skylar. I appreciate your warm introduction and listing all those things.
Of course.
So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's always nice to return to Studio 21.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being here. So my first question is, what or who inspired you to become a teacher?
Well, I think all of us would recognize that our parents are our first teachers and probably our most important teachers. I was very fortunate to have my parents with me for many, many years, and I think they instilled in me many of the same qualities that good teachers have. They were very patient. They encouraged me without pushing me, and they always gave me the feeling that I could do anything I wanted to if I put my mind to it. So, and they, of course, as children of depression aged, went through the depression, and so we learned very quickly that you don't take things for granted. And they gave in me a very strong work ethic and a sense that, we always need to leave the world a little better than we found it.
Absolutely. Those are great parents. Were either of them teachers?
No, neither of them were teachers. I think both of them had experienced a lot of misfortune in their childhood. They both lost parents before they were, adolescents, and I think that left a mark on them. I know my father had to leave the university, which he had, worked very hard to attain admission during the war and, served his country, and that's the way it went in the 40s.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They didn't have the same opportunities, and they always wanted to make sure we had opportunities that they did not have. And probably, unlike a lot of people my own age, my father always talked about how the men with whom he worked always thought it was stupid for him to send his daughters to college.
Wow. Because,
the women were just supposed to stay home, get married, and have kids.
Yeah.
And his opinion was, which I always valued, was, mothers are the most important people to educate because they're going to bring up the next generation.
So true.
So I was very fortunate. And their lessons have lasted me and held me in good stead for many years.
That's amazing. So what grade and subject did you teach, and what led you to those?
Well, I had a very interesting career when I started teaching, and I guess beginning teachers usually have that kind of experience. When I first started to teach, I was in Massachusetts, and I had applied to be the head of the science department in the local high school, and that's the position I believed I was going to have. When it went to the school board, all of a sudden I was a 4th grade teacher. Wow. In the elementary school because they didn't think a woman could be the high school science teacher, and do that job. So then I did some work at the 4th grade level, which I found very difficult because it was one of those team teaching situations, and there was like Attila the Hun and the cool hippie guy, and there was me, and so if somebody was going to have the kids act out, it seemed to me it was always the new teacher who looked like, about their age and stage and size. So then I moved to 2nd grade, and then my husband at the time was stationed in the military, so when he finished his military experience in Massachusetts, I moved down here so he could go to graduate school, and then I began my career in Radnor, and I started at 2nd grade until the enrollments went down, and I had the choice of either teaching gifted children or not having a job. So I taught gifted children. And so from then on, like it was about 1979 or 80, I began working with gifted students and doing some science coordination work and then teaching full-time gifted. So it's, for most of my years in Radnor, I was teaching of the gifted.
Wow.
But every kid's gifted. They just, open their packages differently. That's what we used to say.
Yeah.
But
wow.
That's not what the state says.
So what were the differences between working with, I guess, typical students as opposed to the gifted students?
Well, I would say there were the thing that teaching elementary school did, first of all, gave us, at least in those days, a lot more latitude about what we did and how we did it. Because you had the children there all day. You didn't have to worry about, the bells ringing and the kids moving here and there. As a teacher of the gifted, I was also freer to develop my own programs and work differently and try to meet the individual needs of kids. And it was always exciting because I kept learning from them.
Yeah.
So it was never the same book. I didn't read the same Dick and Jane story year after year for 10 years.
Right.
And I found that when I taught science, I really was a little bored because you teach the same thing like 4 or 5 periods a day.
Yeah.
And then you do the same thing the next year and the same thing the next.
Yeah.
It's elementary teaching is a lot more fun because you have a lot more latitude and you have, a range of students that are always helping you learn.
Absolutely. And what made you love science?
When I started my undergraduate work, I was a biology major because at that time I sort of always wanted to make a difference. So I was either going to be a doctor or a teacher. And then because of my experiences with other people who wanted to be doctors, who I found were not always very nice because they were highly competitive, I decided if I was going to spend the rest of my life with people that I wanted to live with and be comfortable with, I chose to go with teachers because they were the nicest people I ever knew.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose to do a career in teaching as opposed to doing a career in medicine, although I certainly could have done a career in medicine.
So what was your most challenging moment as a teacher and what was your proudest moment?
I would say the most challenging aspect of being a teacher is dealing with parents.
Yeah.
And I think, particularly as a new teacher, you're often too smart but not wise.
Yeah.
And I think after becoming a parent, I became a little bit more understanding. But I think particularly in an area such as Radnor, parents feel that there's an entitlement that comes with having their children in our schools. I also found that it is sometimes difficult to understand where parents are coming from. And often I learned early on, and it was a very hard lesson, that sometimes you're being blamed by parents for things that you have no control over. Many times I have tried to figure out why are they so upset, and then I'll learn something's going on in their home, or there's been a situation that's made them in a position that they're very uncomfortable in, and it's like kicking the dog, the next person gets it. So it's taken me a while not to take a lot of things personally. They still bother me, but it's helped me understand that sometimes you are the brunt of a situation that you have no control over, but you are paying the consequences for.
Absolutely.
Maybe you've done that yourself.
I believe I have done it myself, and I've also experienced it from the other end.
Yes, and I think, sometimes my daughter will say, "Ma, why are you acting that way?" And I think, oh.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just take it out on the next person.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that I think you develop as you get older.
Yeah.
A little wiser.
Definitely. And what was your proudest moment?
Well, actually, one of the proudest moments I had probably will make you think I'm really crazy. But when I first began teaching as a second grade teacher, I taught at Rosemont Elementary School, which is no longer there. It was a school they closed. And a mother many years later came back to me and said, you were Jamie's favorite teacher. And I thought, I never did anything for that kid. I mean, some kids you really work hard at teaching them to read or do extra special projects with them. And I said, really? I said, I don't ever recall doing anything special for your child. And she said, well, when there was nobody there to play third base, you did it. And I thought, it's those little things that you don't ever realize that make a difference for a child.
I bet you were a great teacher.
Well, I was a very busy teacher, and I tried hard to do my job.
Yeah.
But it's, there's always more to be done. It's like being a mother,
Yes.
It's never done.
Yeah.
So,
Most important job.
yep, mothers and teachers, yep.
Yeah. So what led you to get involved in the League of Women Voters?
Well, it was one of those parents.
Awesome.
When I had a room at Ithan Elementary School that was adjacent to the library. And the librarian always had parent helpers in. And so this parent helper kept telling me I should join the League of Women Voters. I should join the League of Voters, And then there was another lady at the high school who was in the guidance department who started nagging me as well. And so I thought, well, I don't really have time to join the League of Women Voters, but it's a good organization, and I believe in the same things they believe in. I should probably join. So I joined, and I went to maybe 1 or 2 meetings a year, and that was it.
What led you to become even more involved?
Well, I think when I retired in 2006, there was a lady on the board who thought, she really needs to do more.
Yeah.
So she nominated me for the state board because I didn't know anything about the League of Women Voters, and I was probably like a fish out of water here. So she figured I'd better go to the state board and figure out how the league operates.
Yeah.
Before I came and kicked myself in the head. So I went to the state board, and I was there, served 2 terms there. Once was like a special projects, and that's when I got into to deal with fracking, and because I was an environmental person, because I have a science background.
Yeah.
And then I also did a lot with issues in action and advocacy at the statewide level as a vice president there. So those are the things I did. And then I came back, and I think Radnor at that time had leadership positions can be very tiring.
Absolutely.
And the person who had been the leader for several years and been trying to find somebody to replace herself because she knew she had, done her thing.
Yeah.
Which is how it goes. You've probably been in that situation too. So I assumed that role, and then, continued to work there. And again, every time we'd ask for new nominations, nobody would be nominated. I said, I really have to leave now. This is it. This is it. So that's how I got involved, and then I assumed that leadership role. And since I really liked, particularly because I had an education background, I tried to do a lot in that field.
What inspired you to run for president? Was it just because they needed someone to fulfill the position, or were you thinking of...
No, I just did it because they needed somebody. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like... And I also knew I could do it. I mean, it wasn't like, this was going to be every job is a challenge, but I thought, it was a time in my life when I could probably make a difference. And I had learned at the state league that the strength of the league is from the local grassroots effort, because I'm sure you've heard the expression, all politics is local.
Yeah.
Well, it really is. And so when you look at things like gerrymandering, when you look at things like, transparency, accountability, right to know, that's here. People make a lot of issues about things at the national level and at the state level, but it all starts right here.
Yes.
Whether it's, campaign finance reform, all that stuff right here.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've always learned in my classes that it needs to start where you're from in order to make bigger change.
And so, and the other thing I found out, there's always a chance to do things in other positions. You can run for politics, you can become the superintendent of schools, you can do all these other things. But the closer you are to where the people are is where you can actually make the difference.
That's a great point.
So that's why I was with the league and have stayed with the league and continue to try to make a difference in our community where we live, because that's where the action is.
Yeah. You've clearly made a big difference.
Well, I'm not so sure, but I keep trying. How's that?
What was the biggest challenge that you faced during your time in the league, and how'd you overcome it?
I'm not sure I ever overcome things, but you sort of resign yourself to the fact that there's probably very little you're going to do that's going to make a difference. But you can I kind of like a terrier dog, and I just keep biting at it. And eventually, maybe something will happen. And I think the most challenging part was when I was on the state league and worked on the fracking issues in Pennsylvania and trying to help legislatures understand that we needed to have, environmental protections for our air and our water and our land, and it never happened. And I would go back again and again and again, and realizing that, the deep pockets of the industry were not going to allow the kinds of protection we needed in our Commonwealth. And that basically Pennsylvania has a long history of, let me say this, and it's not very nice, but they tend to privatize the profits and socialize the cost. Mm-hmm. So whether it was coal, whether it was logging, whether it was oil, whether it's natural gas, those developers tend to fill their pockets with the money, then they leave, and we are left with the dirty water, the dirty air, the unclean land, the, waste dumps and so on. So it's really a hard lesson to learn that sometimes the right way is not the way it's done.
Absolutely.
And
That's
resigning,
been a hard lesson for me.
And I think sometimes, you can only bang your head against the wall so long and stay up at night realizing that what you're doing is you're giving it your best shot, but it's really probably not going to make a lot of difference.
But I give you a lot of credit for remaining so determined.
Well, last night I wrote an article. I wrote to the EPA about increasing the methane standards. So, I haven't given up.
Yeah.
But I've realized that, any change is going to be very incremental.
Yeah.
So that's why I, look at where we live and how we can protect what we have in terms of things like stormwater and traffic and those kinds of issues that affect everybody in Radnor, because you can be assured if it's affecting us, it's, we're not an island, but you better stand up for, the space we have to do the right thing.
Definitely. Of the issues that you've worked to resolve with the League, which are you most passionate about and why? It seems like it has to do with fracking. But... Well,
I spent a lot of time on that, but I would say what that taught me about is the importance of having the community involved, because there were some communities who could do things in Pennsylvania because of their zoning or because of their ordinances that other places didn't. And I learned, for example, that there are some places in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that don't even have zoning. So you can put a fracking area right beside a church or a school,
wow.
And so I understood, that helped me understand how important things are like zoning and ordinances and local, rules and regulations. So whether it's parking in Radnor, whether it's traffic in Radnor, whether it's who can build what where, how high the roads are, the light pollution, the noise pollution, all those things that you don't think about.
Yeah.
Ultimately could make a huge difference. So, for example, we presented stuff on like a light ordinance. We still don't have a light ordinance in Radnor that I know of. But, we had the stadium lights shining into people's houses in the community. That's not good.
Yeah.
So we need to be thinking about a lot of different issues. Noise, how does that affect you? So if you're talking about, restaurants in Wayne and you're living behind them, and they have a band on Saturday night, how does that work? How are you going to regulate those things? And I know because you're a Villanova student, sometimes the parties can get a little out of hand
Absolutely.
In the neighborhoods. So that there are those kinds of issues that probably, as a person in university, you don't think about that. Because most likely young people are a little more self-centered. But, if you're a new mother with a baby and you're getting noise or rackets or lights, those things all impact people's life. So I think it's, maintaining a quality of life where you live and making sure we abide by the safeguards we have. That's the first step that then we can grow and move beyond that. And I'm really proud, like things that have happened in Radnor have moved to, Delaware County and things like
Good.
that. You can keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Because like we worked for decades for a health department, and we finally got one after COVID. So
good. Yeah. Very important.
But it's just simple things. We
Yes.
were the largest county by population in the country that didn't have a public health department.
Wow.
Right here. So if you know the issues and you work at them long and hard enough, sometimes things change.
Definitely.
Not always, but you can keep trying.
Yeah. I love how you're so centered around the community's needs. That's how it should be. And most of the time it's not that way.
Well, people are thinking about, what guy told what lie and who's on what plane where and, but the really important things is your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all starts.
Yep. What has been your most rewarding experience working with the interns and student members of the League?
Well, I'll tell you. Sometimes, one time, let me tell you this story. One time when I did my first project on fracking in the city of Philadelphia, we invited an Inquirer reporter to attend because we gave him a free lunch. And he wrote the article about the fracking forum because we had people there from Penn State, we had people from the industry, we had people from the Delaware Riverkeeper. So there was the League tries to present varied opinions on the same position. So this reporter wrote it up in the Inquirer and he said, "Whip smart women in comfortable shoes." That's how he described the League of Women Voters. And most of us, do wear comfortable shoes. And we are certainly probably have more gray hair than we should. And I thought, we really need to begin to pay it forward.
Yeah.
And also, when we tried to do voter registration events at the high school, one of the League members, who was also a teacher who worked in Lower Marion, came back to me and she said, "They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to see us." And I realized, she says, we have to work with the kids because the kids can register other kids. We can't do it.
Right.
So that then I was sitting, so that got me thinking. And then I was sitting at I think it was a Radnor Education Foundation meeting, and they talked about these internship programs. And I thought, well, I never knew about that before, so I started writing to do an internship program. And I was very fortunate because I was able to write, and the only thing I could give kids was a good recommendation for college.
Yeah.
So I started doing internships programs, and I'd meet with the students, and I say, well, what are you interested in? Somebody's interested in composting, somebody's interested in the judicial system, somebody's interested in abortion rights, somebody's, whatever they were interested in, the parks, trees, whatever. So we would sit down and work together. Somebody was interested in like newspapers and local papers. And so whatever they were interested in, I would try to work out so they could meet other people that I had connected with and they could learn about it and then do some kind of presentation. And to get to know the young kids, and then they began their own club at the high school, and that was very exciting. And we had one intern who really has, excelled and been parts of different, worked for different legislators. And actually one of the first interns I had, her mother came to me to start the program and said, my kid's home all summer. Can you find something interesting for her to do? So now she's worked for Mary Gay Scanlon, and she's now in Washington doing policy work.
That's
so
awesome.
It's exciting that these kids actually do things, and you can start them on and on. One of the students, I had a young man, came back a couple of summers and wanted programs because he said, if I can show that I'm doing something, I can get a scholarship. And so we help him do Vote 411, help him find information on the candidates. So they come back. And now I've been lucky to have them come back a couple of years in a row because they come back to the high school students when they graduate and talk about the importance of voting and how to fill out an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot and all the things that they need to do to encourage the students from their perspective and not my perspective about how important it is to vote.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that.
That's
and they're
so
wonderful
awesome.
people because, working with younger people keeps you young.
Absolutely. Let's Vote Nova has done a really great job of making sure that we're all educated and that we got our votes in before the midterm.
Yes. And I know I've worked with them and given them the cards they can give out where you can just, link to Vote 411 to find out about the ballot and the candidates and all that stuff. So Villanova has been very receptive to using some of those materials from the League because I know the League is nonpartisan. So that's important, and that's something else everyone needs to know. As someone who's a League leader, I cannot support or endorse a candidate. Members can, but not the leaders.
Right.
So we maintain that very closely.
Good. Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to find leaders because they don't want to give up that political power. So that's another thing that you have to...
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So that means I can't go out there and go to somebody's coffee who's running for this position or
Right.
endorse somebody who might be my friend.
Right. Is that difficult ever?
Well, it is. But it's also a good excuse.
Yeah. And who is your support system and what is your favorite memory with them?
My favorite support system, I guess, is my family, right? They have to be because they've put up with a lady who's working very hard as a teacher and as a League of Women Voters person. I was very fortunate. I wore my necklace with my 2 kids on it. I have 2 girls, and they're now on their own and teaching themselves. They're also teachers and doing very well in the world. And they understood what it was like to work. And they, I think they've been very supportive. And so if I have tech questions or how do I do this stuff on my cell phone and what does this mean and how can I set this up and my email's messed up, they're very good. Now, my husband is another great support. He's always good. He can make sure, I can leave him a dinner to eat by himself and he's okay. I can also depend on him to proofread everything I write. So if I'm going to publish anything, he'll proofread it, he'll check, he'll do, he's a perfectionist, okay? I get things done, he gets things done right.
Right.
So that's the difference.
It's a good team.
Mm-hmm. So I'm very lucky I have a supportive family because, as you know, people who work hard need help.
Absolutely. And what's your best piece of advice for women who want to get involved in education or politics?
Get involved with the League of Women Voters because that's where you can learn.
Absolutely.
But be prepared. It's hard work.
Roberta, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the work you've done in Radnor Township and for the League of Women Voters.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure to do what I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
This has been Sky's the Limit. I'm Skylar Musick. See you next time.